The climate crisis cannot be denied. The 11 hottest years on record have been the last 11 years, and extreme weather events are wreaking havoc on populations across the world. But at the same time, climate policies are being withdrawn at a record pace. This has led a lot of people to become depressed about the situation, a spread of sort of climate doomerism. People feel like they have lost hope. But this is not the death of hope. This is the death of liberal environmentalism. Welcome to the Class Line, where we discuss the class interests behind major events. I am lucky today to be joined by Josie Seaton from the Central Committee of the Revolutionary Communist Party.
Thank you for having me.
So Josie and I are going to discuss the climate crisis and the death of liberal environmentalism. But maybe first we can just start with what's the state of things?
The state of things is very serious, and it's very different from, I think, what I was taught, at least, about climate change growing up, which is that, you know, it's about saving the polar bears, the ice caps are melting, kind of this moral question. But now the climate crisis is here. It's very real, and it really, you see the class divide in it. We're not all in the same boat, actually, on this. For example, in India, in the big cities, you have air pollution at like emergency levels every day, actually. So people open their weather app and you see a skull emoji, meaning don't go outside, but you have to. You have to go to work. You can't afford air purifiers or whatever. And you certainly can't afford what Ambani, who's a petrochemicals giant in India, has, which is a 22-floor mansion. He has 600 servants, and an artificial snow room. He's also in the Epstein files.
Okay, not surprising.
Yeah. Or here at home in Canada, we've had record wildfire seasons because of climate change. 2023 was the worst year on record for wildfires. Thousands were evacuated from their homes. Mm-hmm. Towns have been burnt or partially burnt down. This too expresses itself through the class divide, because you have working class families who have to pick up and start their life again somewhere else with no money anymore to do that. They get like $1,000 or something from Danielle Smith, but they will have to fight with insurance companies for years and years trying to get their lives back on track. And there's actually many places in the States and elsewhere where you just can't get insurance for your home anymore because they don't want to pay out when disaster comes.
Yeah, so I remember I was an environmentalist in the 1990s, dating myself. And I remember back then it being, it was kind of gaining steam. There was the Kyoto Accords, and there was this there was this worry that a lot of people had. There was this concern. And there was this idea we all have an interest in protecting the planet, protecting the environment, pressure developed, and a lot of people were, quite rightly concerned about the climate. But back when I was doing that, it was sort of this. Unless you studied it, it didn't affect you so directly. Nowadays, I think it's hard not to be affected by it. Even in a country like Canada, everyone remembers with the wildfires, you had smog, or you had smoke clouds hitting big cities all over. In Toronto and Montreal, it was like that. You had, in British Columbia, you had floods. You had, you have these extreme weather events that happen all over the world. Entire coastlines have been affected in poor countries, for example. But yeah, I think the point that you've raised here is a good one, is that it doesn't affect everyone equally. The bourgeoisie have ways of not being affected so much, and the working class does not. But yeah, that's this. We don't go on about this forever, because I think if anyone's listening to this podcast, they'll know at least something about the climate crisis. It's been talked about to death over the past couple of decades. To the point at which most people recognize that there's a problem. I think only the most deluded Trumpians will be denying it. But yeah, there is a climate crisis. It is very real. And everybody wants to do something about it. But I guess things have been attempted. And why we're having this discussion is a lot of things have been attempted and a lot of things have failed. And that's what's led people to feel hopeless. We're here to tell you that you don't need to feel hopeless, because there is hope. You just have to, what we need to do is to analyze critically the things that have been attempted and figure out why they failed, so we can develop a clear strategy to fight for things that will work, that can and will work. And so, yeah, what has been attempted here as a way to solve the climate crisis in Canada?
Yeah, well, first on the point of pessimism and eco-anxiety and whatever, yeah, I think a lot of that comes from people assuming that we've tried everything.
Yeah.
That if these policies are being pulled back now, it must be because maybe people don't care enough or there's just no policy that could work. But what has been attempted is part of a specific strategy, which we would say is the strategy of green liberalism, which includes first kind of an ideological side of individual responsibility, right? So making ordinary people feel that it's as much their job as an oil and gas CEO's.
It's all of our fault, yeah.
Yes, it's all of humanity. So blaming them, basically. And then you also have market solutions, which are meant to push the market in the right direction. In other words, push corporations in the right direction to tackle the climate crisis. Yes, and that strategy in particular is what has failed, and that is, I think you can tell by how I've described it, that is what was possible, or the most we can do under capitalism.
Yeah, so the individual responsibility thing, the idea that we all need to monitor our carbon footprint, and you need to recycle, and you need to try to do everything possible to, we each do our own little part and it will all add up to something big. I think that has failed in general. And also, when we think more broadly about what that was, it was a intentional attempt by the bourgeoisie to deflect attention away from them. Actually, you had some interesting things to say about BP, right?
Yeah. The carbon footprint calculator, I had to do this as a kid. I remember being in the computer lab and, oh my gosh, I'm polluting so much. But that was actually part of a PR campaign cooked up by BP Oil just a few years after they were in big trouble for dumping a bunch of toxic waste in Alaska. And they specifically state that they wanted to deflect blame and deflect responsibility.
Of course.
100%. Or even with recycling. This is largely a scam. I took a tour of the dump, actually, in Edmonton a year ago. Long story, but I had the opportunity.
Okay.
And I learned why only about 8% of the stuff that you think you're recycling actually gets recycled. It's because it's cheaper in most cases to just
profitable, yeah.
Make new plastic instead of going through the trouble of recycling old plastic. So, I think these solutions, the only thing they actually worked at doing was making ordinary people feel bad for a crisis that, as we would argue, they didn't cause.
Yeah, according to Oxfam, they did a study last year. It said the 1% emit as much planet heating pollution as 2/3 of humanity. There are many different ways to express the same concept about that we're not all to blame. Is that there is a big class divide in who is responsible for this. And then that leads us to the question of, who can actually enact change on it? Is that it's everyone can make decisions in their personal life. Sure, go ahead. But you're not going to solve the climate crisis this way. It can only be solved by, I'd say an economy-wide approach, taking the whole economy into consideration by the big powers here, not by an individual. It's kind of very cynical approach from the big oil companies to say, oh, well, I know you're mad at us, but you, 16-year-old kid in your bedroom, it's actually your fault. That's basically what's being said. But moving on to the policies. So what are the policies that have been attempted in Canada?
Yeah, so this is where we get into the market-based solutions. So first you have different kinds of regulations, approval processes that companies have to go through before, say, building a new pipeline or something. You also have cap on emissions. But probably the biggest part of the market solutions, the main thing that was supposed to make a difference, was the industrial carbon tax. So how this is supposed to work is it's supposed to make it less profitable to pollute. So based on how much they emit, companies have to pay a tax. But if you look into how it actually works, it's really quite astounding. First of all, only the companies that pollute less actually get a credit for, again, not polluting, just less than others.
Just a bit less than the other ones, yeah.
Yeah, so they get rewarded for this with a credit. And then the companies that pollute more can then buy that credit from them and say, well, now I've offset some of my emissions. It's actually billions. There's a market for trading these credits, which is worth billions of dollars. And you can also get credits from buying them from projects that say they're doing something that's good for the environment. These are often actually not good for the environment. They'll, for example, say that they're protecting a rainforest, a part of a rainforest, and then someone looks into it. It was not under threat anyways. A study from several years ago showed that 90% of carbon credits issued were of that nature. They were bogus. And you even have instances where, for example, the Quebec provincial government gave out carbon credits for free just to prevent these companies from going elsewhere where they wouldn't have to pay a tax. So, yeah, I mean, these policies don't work how I think an ordinary person who wants a planet to live on would think they would work, where you actually get punished for polluting. They're specifically designed not to hurt profits too much. And you can even read this on the Government of the Canadian website, where they talk about carbon leakage, which means companies going elsewhere to avoid a carbon tax. They specifically design these policies to avoid that.
Okay, so you're telling me carbon leakage. In my mind, what comes to mind is, they always come up with these nice sounding phrases, but then when you look into it, like, I think carbon leakage is leakage. I think like an oil leak or something. No. That's what you're telling me is what that means is, no, that means capital leaking out of them, like capital flight. So they're more concerned about them putting in a policy that deters capital investment or leads to capital. Why do they call it carbon leakage? It should just be called capital flight. Like,
yeah, we have a phrase for this.
So, but then if they say, well, we're very concerned about carbon leakage, then everyone goes, yeah, me too.
Right, and your eyes glaze over. It just sounds like government speak. Yeah.
Yeah, they have a lot of ways of confusing you. Okay, there's a few other things here. There was the EV mandate. There was different grants given to people to buy electric vehicles, although up until now, well, we'll see what happens with these Chinese EVs. Most EVs have been over $60,000. So people to actually afford them, even if you got a government grant, would be very difficult. And then I would also ask, is everyone driving their own personal electric vehicle going to solve the environmental crisis? We can get in a bit more into that later. They banned plastic straws. There were policies like this. There's all these types of policies that seem silly with the gravity of the crisis. That's the way I'd put it. It's like this massive environmental crisis, and you're banning plastic straws. Yay! There was also the consumer carbon tax, which maybe we should talk about the problem with that, because it's different than the industrial carbon tax, which they have canceled the consumer carbon tax now, but it was a thing for many years. Yes.
So, I think basically the first big thing Carney did when he got into office, he axed the tax. And now, but this is the consumer carbon tax. Yeah. So all that really is charging extra money to just ordinary people filling their cars up with gas. And the idea that how they would say this is supposed to work is that now they people go and buy EVs or use public transit. But as you said, buying EVs, not actually really an option at all. Not an affordable one in any case.
Not for most people,
Yeah. And and then basically what it amounts to is just punishing people who have no other option. I mean, we know public transit is crumbling in crisis basically everywhere. Yeah. So it just amounts to one more way that the poor, the working class, are made poorer. Yeah. I think even though there was all this right-wing hullabaloo stirred up about it, I mean, the fact that working class people were angry about this tax makes perfect sense. And they probably also understood on a certain level, honestly, whether they really believe in the climate crisis or not, that this can't really be doing anything. Yeah. You filling up your car with gas, but then just paying more is not saving the planet.
Yeah. Well, this is part and parcel with the whole strategy. If your strategy is contingent on you not affecting private profit, well, then punishing workers is fine.
Right.
Essentially, that's fine. We're not worried. This is liberal environmentalism in a nutshell. We're not worried about punishing working class people. We're worried about punishing capital. That says everything that's wrong about it. So, in order to understand these different policies, they're all different. They're all a little bit different, and we could go around in circles talking in depth about each one.
Super complex.
Very complicated. They've designed them in this very complicated way. Maybe I don't think we need to do that, though. I think it's probably best if we tackle the general philosophy behind these policies. So that actually comes from, well, we'll talk about it. Well, Mark Carney, our prime minister. What's Mark Carney's climate philosophy?
Yes, well, there's what he thinks and there's what he's doing now. Yeah. So we'll start with what he thinks. I read a couple chapters on the environment from his book, Values. Very interesting, actually, to see how he thinks. I would almost recommend people read it, but maybe don't buy it. Don't give him money for that. But he basically describes his outlook on, the system, society as a whole, is that the market actually doesn't self-correct. The market is not moral, as he says. It also can't keep itself out of crisis. It can't do what's rational all the time if you just leave it be. So, according to him, it has to be pulled in the right direction to align with what people need, with what makes sense. And so this is kind of there's the value that the market sees, and there's the value that people see. Yeah. And he recognizes they're not the same, but he thinks that you can actually affect that. And so when it comes to the climate, then his idea is that with basically all the policies that we've discussed, that would push things in the right direction, that you can get the market to invest in clean energy and move away from fossil fuels and basically push things in the right direction.
Yeah, so in his book, he actually talks about how he openly admits that the rise of what he calls as market societies, which he means capitalism, is combined with a decline in what he says, a decline in values. And actually his book is titled Values. The S is brackets. So it's value, meaning value created by capitalism. And he's approaching it as an economist. And then the S is ethics, morals, human values. And so, his solution to this is, well, we have to make the market value things. And so with environmental crisis, we should price in the environmental crisis into production and into consumption, right? And actually, that helps us understand all of these various policies, why these policies are, you think, oh, yes, industrial carbon tax, that's fine, or something. I don't know. It seems pretty straightforward to me. And when you read about it, you're like, oh, it's really complicated. It's like ridiculously complicated. A lot of these policies, or the cap and trade, or the carbon emissions, it's the credits, the carbon credits. It's really kind of strange, because they are policies designed to not affect. Mark Carney, right from the outset of his ideas, is accepting private ownership and private production for profit, accepting capitalism. He accepts capitalism, just try to make it moral. Try to make capital care, I don't know, by making it profitable to save the planet.
Yeah, and try to overcome this contradiction where, I mean, the fact is it's not profitable to protect the environment. It's always more profitable just in general in business to cut corners, to throw away your waste instead of spending money
to pollute,
on doing something. Yeah, it's more profitable to pollute. And he does kind of recognize that capitalism doesn't have feelings, right? He recognizes that. And he has this example he really likes. He uses it twice where he says, the Amazon, the company, has a value, but Amazon rainforest does not until, its trees are cut down, its resources are taken and put onto the market. So, he's not dumb. He's not a dumb guy, but he thinks that this contradiction could be overcome.
Right. So that's the theoretical framework behind not just what it's actually kind of complicated because if you look at that and then you see what Carney's doing, you'd be like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But the thing is, Carney's been a big player behind the scenes for a long time. He was a governor of Bank of Canada, governor of Bank of England. He was a special envoy for climate action at the UN or something.
Yeah.
He spearheaded this net zero emissions banking alliance. And he was an advisor to the Canadian government, to the Trudeau government. So, and even before that, I believe he was also an advisor to the British government too. He's been a pretty big guy behind the scenes. So with that being said, he's been central to the general philosophy. He's kind of the darling of liberal environmentalism. And he gives a theoretical framework for how they should approach this. It helps us kind of understand the policies that they've implemented. Like, why have they implemented these policies? Well, because they're guided by a certain understanding of how they're going to, even if maybe some of them are not honest or disingenuous, but some of them might even be genuinely trying to tackle the environmental crisis in this way. And they're following this framework of Mark Carney's.
And they have reason to want to try to tackle the climate crisis, at least insofar as it doesn't hurt profits. One of Carney's, the highlights of his career, according to him or other bankers, was a speech he gave in 2015 where he warned a room full of bankers that the climate crisis could destroy the entire financial system. Insurance crisis, destruction of capital, climate refugees, all of this. So, he definitely understands that this is a threat to his system as well.
Yeah, so this led David Suzuki, who I grew up watching The Nature of Things when I was a kid. He's probably, for a long period of time, he's the most well-known environmentalist in Canada, who lately published there was a very depressing interview with him. But in the interview, he talked about Mark Carney. And he said, we'll get back to that interview, this one quote, he said, "Mark Carney is the most well-informed prime minister on climate change that we have had. I talked to Carney when he was the head of the Bank of England, and it's very clear he understands the threat we face with climate change and the need to act immediately." All good, right? So maybe before we get into what Carney's done, because I think if you haven't been living under a rock, you kind of know what he's done. But the Trudeau era implemented a lot of these policies that we already talked about were implemented under Trudeau. And yes, the general philosophy was to implement policies that are not going to threaten private profit, or they're definitely not going to threaten private property. They're not going to take away property from polluting companies. They're definitely not going to try to rationally plan the economy. Now, the centerpiece of at the center of Trudeau's climate policy was Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault, and he was a Greenpeace activist, the CEO of Équiterre, Quebec environmental group. And a lot of people had high hopes in him when he became environment minister, because this is probably the most active. He says, I'm an activist. I'm still an activist, you know. Oh, you have an environmental activist as climate, as your minister for climate. Okay, wow. Environment minister. That's incredible. But then you see how the importance of ideas. What ideas was Guilbeault guided by? Now, this is what he said. He said, my issue has always been with pollution, but I'm part of a government that has been very clear on this. We are not going after production. We are going after the emissions. Now, I wonder, that last bit about not going after production, who is he saying that to? He is trying to reassure the bourgeoisie that we will not touch your production. We will not touch your private profit. We will not touch your private ownership of industry, and we're not going to interfere in the way you want to produce things. And I think this is the Achilles heel of all liberal environmental policy. It makes it toothless, it makes it overly complicated and ridiculous, and it makes it ultimately not work.
Yeah, I mean, my issue is with pollution, not production. It's like saying, my issue is with the result, not the cause.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, well, then you're going to still have the result, basically. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as Marxists, we often say you can't control what you don't own. That obviously goes for workers. It also goes for the government. Their job is to create the best possible conditions, policies, all of this so that investors can know that they will get the maximum return on their investment. They want to be able to profit as much as possible, or they will be outcompeted and ran out of the game. And that's just the logic of the system. That's how it works. Yeah. And so if you're unwilling to even touch private property, then there's really nothing that you can do to actually change how the capitalists produce, or very, very little. I mean, these policies, the carbon tax and things like this, it's hard to estimate, but by all accounts, they've made negligible results in reducing emissions. And I think it's also worth noting they were meant actually to create a boom of investment in green energy. Yeah. That's not happened because it's more profitable to just keep making money off the infrastructure and the investments you already have, which is in oil and gas. So there's this huge inertia baked into the system from that.
Yeah, so Mark Carney was elected to much fanfare last year on this wave of Canadian nationalism against Trump. And I think there were people like Suzuki that were happy, that were like, yay, he's our guy. He's an environmentalist. He's so good. He's going to help us solve the environmental crisis. But what did Carney do? What has he done for the environment?
He has scrapped all the policies that he specifically said in his book would work. Yeah. And I don't think it's because he had a change of heart and doesn't care about the environment anymore. Yeah. I think Suzuki's probably right that he's the most well-informed on this topic, but the point is that the system cannot afford green liberalism anymore. Yeah. I mean, we see that from the beginning, there was always, these policies, whatever, were always designed to protect profit. But, they still had some effect. They still deterred investment because they do cut into the competitiveness of these companies. And so now with Canadian capitalism in its deepest ever crisis, it is just unaffordable to basically do anything to try to protect the environment. Basically, tomorrow has to be sacrificed for just, getting through today.
Yeah, so because he bases everything on the so-called market, the market forces are the deciding factor.
Yes.
And all of his attempt to make it moral or ethical or care about the planet are being scrapped. His first order of business is he scrapped the carbon tax. As you mentioned, he axed the tax. He suspended the federal fossil fuels emissions cap. He signed a memorandum. He just recently signed a memorandum of understanding to build a new pipeline with the Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. So really, he also scrapped the EV mandate. So, this is a very astounding thing for a so-called environmentalist to do. Now, as we mentioned, these climate policies didn't work. I think at some level, maybe he realized that. He said he always uses this word to describe himself philosophically, pragmatic. What does that mean in this context?
Yeah, well, I think basically what's pragmatic for capitalism is insane for the future of humanity.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically. So yeah, I mean, really, he doesn't have much choice if he wants this system to continue, then to get rid of these regulations and taxes and so on. Because yeah, I mean, this threat of capital flight is very, very real. We saw it in 2015 when the NDP was elected in Alberta and talking about raising the carbon tax, raising royalties, and then you have oil and gas companies just start selling off billions of dollars worth of assets, basically holding the whole economy hostage because they can. And
they decide things, yeah.
Yeah, no matter who you vote for, capital decides. So basically you had this uproar from the whole industry. Even Kevin O'Leary jumped in on that and said he would go to war with Notley. So this kind of thing absolutely cannot happen now with the crisis that capitalism is in. It needs to be basically Canada's open for business at any cost to the planet or humans or anything. That is actually what is rational for Carney to do right now from the perspective of this system.
Yeah, so if you accept capitalism, you have to accept what it wants, what it needs at any given moment. Yes, master, we will sacrifice the child, or whatever. Like, this is basically, we will sacrifice the planet. That's what they're saying. Oh, pragmatism. Don't be crazy. Don't be, what are you, a utopian? We have to do what's possible.
Right.
What's possible for capitalism is destroy the planet, is attack unions, is cut environmental regulation, is ramp up military spending to the greatest level it's been in generations. This is all very pragmatic, of course. We, of course, do not accept this framing of the question. We do not accept the reasons behind it. But I think it shows even well-meaning people can kind of get trapped into that logic. And this is why we think, we can get into that in a minute, it's very important to break that it's not hopeless. It's only hopeless if you base yourself on capitalism. And so if you break from capitalism, all of a sudden it ends up not being hopeless. That's the solution to climate and eco-anxiety and doomerism, is to fight against capitalism and fight for a new form of society. So a good example of this, I think, is of the attaching yourself to a system and then not being able to find a solution is David Suzuki, I mentioned already. In that interview he did that I mentioned was very depressing. He said it's too late.
Telling people to hunker down and basically prepare for apocalypse.
Yeah, basically. That was one of the things that came out of that interview. He said, he supported Justin Trudeau. He was the most environmentally conscious prime minister at the time. And he was so happy that we elected him because Stephen Harper was really bad. And then Trudeau turned around and bought a pipeline a couple of years later, the Trans Mountain Pipeline. He talked about Carney, the most environmentally conscious prime minister we've ever had. Very, very good. And then he turned around and he axed the carbon tax and he did all these other things. He passed this, was it C51? I can't remember what it was.
C5.
C5, sorry, federally, that allows them to avoid bypass regulations.
Through the Henry VIII clause. Nice reminder that we live under a monarchy.
Yes, very good, very good. Nice monarchy. When the interviewer raised that with him, he said, well, we have to do that. And then he said, the focus on politics, economics, and law are all destined to fail because they are based around humans. So let's just dwell on that sentence a little bit. What does that mean?
Right. Yeah. This idea that humanity as a whole did this. But I mean, it's like we said at the beginning, just in the way that there is a class divide in how the effects of the climate crisis are felt. In the same way, like, it is the ruling class that decides everything about how we deal with the climate crisis or not. Our politicians are basically just completely bought out by not just the oil and gas industry, but the whole entire capitalist class. They will do what they demand that they do. And what we want, that doesn't really factor in. when it comes to them deciding what climate action to take or not. So no one told Carney that ordinary people did not just say, we don't care about the environment anymore, go ahead and remove all these policies. He did that because the system demanded it. So, this doesn't prove that solving the climate crisis is impossible, right? Actually, what's been tried is very, very little. It proves that solving it is not profitable.
Yeah, that's it. There's been a lot of noise made. The conservatives have been banging the drum on this. The Fraser Institute, different economic institutes have been talking about how in the past, I think it's 11, 12, maybe more. It started before Trudeau came in. The conservatives, of course, use it to say it started because of Trudeau. There was a capital flight, basically. The capital leaving the economy was increasing at a faster rate than the capital coming into the economy. And definitely Trudeau's policies didn't help. Because if you think about it, you're a big billionaire. You have money, you want to invest. Why would you invest in a market that has a carbon tax? Why would you invest in a market that had more environmental regulations? You wouldn't, depending on what industry you're in. But a lot of industry, you wouldn't do that. You would invest in a different country, in a different jurisdiction. So the fact of the matter, these two things are linked. And what does that prove? So it's not the workers that didn't want to solve the environmental crisis. It's the bourgeoisie. Quite often people say, vote with your dollar. Well, they're voting with their dollar.
Yes.
They're voting against the environment, against the planet. And so that says it all. That says everything we need to understand about the class nature of this. It's not the problem with humans, as David Suzuki said. It's the problem with the system. And it's the problem with the system is then it's the problem with the capitalist class who have now, I used to say that they're not bad people necessarily, but after the Epstein thing, I'm like, okay, no, they're all bad people. But it is the system that creates these people.
Yes.
And then they have interests. Like a CEO of a company couldn't just couldn't have an epiphany and decide, wow, I'm destroying the planet, I better stop doing that. And then he starts a whole bunch of policies in his company to shift away from using certain materials and it would make them less profitable. Then he's going to be axed by the board. That's basically, and then they're going to put someone in who's going to make sure the company is as profitable as possible. That's capitalism. So yeah, Carney, in cutting away all these policies, has proven that green liberalism doesn't work. And capitalism, you cannot solve the environmental crisis under capitalism. And any attempt to maintain capitalism, it's kind of like the tiger trying to make the tiger eat lettuce. He's going to rip your face off.
Yes.
And that's what we're having right here. So yeah, Carney's book, interesting book, failure.
Yep.
He must admit that. Someone's got to corner him and be like, are you going to admit that your book was wrong?
Yeah, I do wonder what he thinks of that in his head, It's, he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly the risks that he is foisting on all of us.
So connected to that, I think, the problem with humans, there's this idea sometimes on the left that the economy, that the interests of humans in the economy is innately in opposition to the environment. Even some people might suggest, Marxism is also bad because it's productive. It's based on increased production, and therefore we need to degrow the economy or something like that. So, and therefore the solution to the environmental crisis is working class people consuming less, taking a hit on your paycheck, somehow getting punished. It's related to the Suzuki thing, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I would say, first of all, the problem, as I think we can see with what we discussed, is not just things being produced, it's what and how. Yeah. And it's the fact that...
And who makes the decision.
Exactly. Yeah. Private property, right? Everything that we use to produce all these industries, they are in private hands. We have no say in how they do anything. Mm-hmm. So that's actually the key problem. But if the working class did have control over production and could collectively, democratically decide what to do with it, I think we would then see that actually what we need to solve the climate crisis is growth, not degrowth, but we need to invest and build clean energy. We need to invest and build infrastructure to help, sustain people through climate disaster. And this would mean more jobs, of course, also very good jobs if we take the profits that are in private hands and actually use them for social good. Basically, everyone's life will get better, actually, not worse. And it's also, it's ludicrous to propose a political program that is, it's in the name, degrowth. It's basically like naming your political program bad things. Things will get worse, join us, right? It doesn't make sense, but also it's just not true, right? For the reasons I said, because we actually need to be able to tackle the climate crisis. We need to build and grow, and that will mean jobs and progress.
Yeah, and we don't believe that the interests of the working class and the interests and the interests in protecting the environment are opposed. I used to hear the slogan, "No jobs on a dead planet." I haven't heard that for a while. It's not a very good slogan. Don't agree with it.
Yeah.
I think that's not a useful way to look at it, because you're basically telling workers, you're pushing them into the arms of the right wing. That's definitely what's happened in the west of Canada. That's heavy resource based, and you have this kind of anti-resource left in the big cities in the east that are kind of like, no jobs on a dead planet. And then the workers basically say, well, I care about my family, and I can't blame them for that. That's their class interest. So the only way that we would say, let's get into solutions, because we've criticized a lot, policies and things, but we're not just here to criticize things, we're here to propose things, because there is hope. That the lack of hope is misplaced. It's lack of hope in liberalism. That's fine. That makes a lot of sense. I have zero hope in liberalism. Lack of hope in a solution, which means, what is liberalism? It means a lack of belief, lack of hope in there being a solution under capitalism. There isn't. The last couple of decades has conclusively proven that. But does that mean we should have no hope in general? Well, as we've already detailed here, if all of the policies and Mark Carney's general philosophy is that you need to develop policies that accept private property and accept production for profit, maybe, crazy idea over here, maybe we could do policies that just do what needs to be done and don't care if you violate production for or profit or private ownership. So, yeah, I think I have a couple things. I don't know if you had stuff you want to suggest. Like, we don't have a blueprint here, but I think as soon as you take off the mental shackle of the policy must adhere to capitalism, amazing possibilities to solve the environmental crisis all of a sudden open up before us.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just one more quick point on this doomerism. It really is a mental shackle, because, I mean, I was reading this interview in The Guardian with a climate scientist, and she was talking about climate doomerism, and she talks about how it comes from this political frustration of thinking that those in power just don't care and will just burn the world down. And she says, this is the most reasonable kind of doomerism, which, say, that's actually just rational.
Yeah, that's
true. That is true.
They don't care. They're not going to do anything.
Yeah. And so then her solution is, have courage. Call your elected representatives. Demand your workplaces put their money where their mouth is. I don't even know what that means. But, I mean, that's why people are hopeless, because there's actually no solution being put forward. I think, there hasn't been a reckoning over the death of green liberalism in the climate movement. There's been no new way proposed forward. Yeah. So if all that people can see is just, keep doing what hasn't worked, then why would you be hopeful? So we actually have to propose solutions that make sense. We need to give people a reason to be hopeful and to act, rather than just tell them, don't be a doomer.
Yeah, I imagine if you called your MP, they would say, well, we do care, however, right. Jobs are being lost, the economy, we can't put in policies that are going to affect private profit. And so then we have to propose something. We have to say, well, screw that. So I guess what do we propose? We don't have, like I said, we don't have a crystal ball. And we don't have a perfect blueprint about what socialism would look like. But I do believe that we can have some ideas. You can actually have some ideas based on just what we talked about. So I think, like, if you look at what's happened, the manufacturing sector in Canada is in dire straits. So why don't we just nationalize it? And why don't we just retool it to produce... I mean, they're talking about more like getting Chinese electric and South Korean electric vehicle companies to invest. Is solving the environmental crisis going to be everyone buying a private EV? I don't think so. What I would do is nationalize the manufacturing industry, retool. You don't ban cars, but you retool the manufacturing sector to produce massive green public transportation systems for every major city and in between the cities. And you make them free and you make them highly accessible and amazing. So people don't need to drive cars. I bet you most people would just stop driving cars. I have a car. I'd stop driving it, to be honest.
Everyone hates driving.
It sucks driving because there's too many people. In a big city, everyone's going the same place anyway. You do that. This is what I'm talking about is a revolution in transportation. But of course, a revolution in transportation can't happen only in transportation. It has to happen in manufacturing. And then what we're talking about here is hundreds of thousands of jobs. So solving the environmental crisis is not incompatible with the interests of the working class. They're actually directly linked. A socialist solution looks at the economy as a whole. I think you'd nationalize the energy sector in Alberta. You take over those whiny oil bosses. You take their wealth from them. And you use that wealth. You guarantee good jobs for all. And you could start to transition away. And then you could have a discussion. It'd be a discussion amongst the working class. Look, you're in a meeting. Nobody's losing their jobs. So that's off the table. So we just need to discuss what's the best way to produce energy and what's the best way to transport ourselves. What do you think? I really want my gas guzzling pickup truck. It's like, why? You know what I mean? I wouldn't ban pickup trucks immediately. Or you wouldn't ban pickup trucks, but like, you start to have a discussion. I believe a majority of people would start to see, even in a province like Alberta, would start to see the logic of it all if the threat of losing your job was taken off the table. So, but yeah, the discussion about pipeline, no pipeline, oil production, no oil production is a bit of a silly discussion to have without talking about working class coming to power, without about socialist planning, without talking about nationalizations, because really you're immediately going to get people's backs up because they're going to be scared that they'll lose their job. They can't pay rent. They can't pay their mortgage for their family, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, that's just like one idea that I have about transportation. I think you can just think about it a little bit. And yeah, there's lots of amazing possibilities that start to open up.
Yeah, I think really with the climate crisis, what can we do under capitalism? Almost nothing. And anything that we could do, the ruling class would ensure that it is paid for by the working class. What can we do under socialism? Everything, Yeah. I think of the example of the Lucas Aerospace Engineering Plan. Might be getting the name slightly wrong. But yeah, this was a weapons manufacturing company in Britain in the 70s, and it was about to be shut down. So the workers they came up with a plan of what they think that this factory could be used for instead. And they came up with a bunch of, for the time, totally cutting edge clean energy technologies.
Okay.
And so this is the kind of creativity and just drive to solve problems that would be unleashed if we could get rid of private property, if the working class was actually in power, could have these discussions. I think, it's true that the climate crisis has already created problems that will be very complex to solve. Mm-hmm. But we already have a massive working class of people that have ideas about what to do. The problem is that now, that they can't do anything, right? They're not in the driver's seat. We're just, watching the 1% drive us toward disaster. But yeah, if we take the wheel from them, I think there's no problem that we couldn't at least begin tackling. But that's the point. You can't even begin tackling it unless you're talking about revolution and ending capitalism.
Yeah, on that question, we're building the Revolutionary Communist Party. We're building we're preparing for revolution because we believe that not only on the question of the environment, but on lots of questions across the board, war, imperialism, living conditions, housing, rent, the cost of groceries, whatever it is, working class people are getting angry. They're getting very mad. And I think a lot of people see the hypocrisy in the climate stuff that's been sold to us, said to us, you're to blame, it's your fault. They know that, most people know that's not true. They know that's the elites at the big billionaires at the top that are responsible for most of the pollution, and they can do whatever they want. And the Epstein files have shown that quite a lot of them do whatever the hell they want. They're really bad. And actually, there is some stuff in there about them pushing some governments around the world, including the Canadian government, to try to remove climate policy for investments.
Yeah, there's also someone in there talking about how the climate crisis might kill a lot of poor people, but that could be okay.
Well, yes,
because it would help us solve it more. Whatever.
They're
evil.
They are not like us. They don't care. They don't care about the planet. They don't care about working class people. But yeah, there is a revolution brewing in society, in the depths of society, and we're preparing for that. And that actually opens up the possibility to solve not only this problem, but a lot of other problems. So yeah, I don't know. I think we've kind of gone around the whole argument here. I don't know if you had any final words.
Yeah, maybe just to sum up, the only reason to not be hopeful is if you don't believe in revolution. But revolution is coming.
That's a fact. Yeah.
Already breaking out around the world. It's absolutely coming here as well. And I would say the thing, don't just hope, don't just wait for something to happen. If you want to act, then you should start building this party now, start acting now, and basically, be part of the reason that you should be hopeful that a revolution will win, and then everything is possible.
Yeah, so we, as Josie said, we are building the Revolutionary Communist Party. We're fighting not just against the climate crisis, we're fighting against all of the oppression, exploitation, the war, the imperialism, the horrible things, the collapsing living standards that capitalism as a system has brought upon us. Yes, capitalism has reduced everything to a cold cash payment. It is profitable to pollute. It is profitable to hire workers on the other side of the country where there are no unions. It is profitable to kill people in war. The solution to all of this is a revolution against the capitalist system where the working class can come to power, can overthrow this small layer of greedy parasites at the top, and can, for the first time ever in human history, really establish a new form of society, one where we can have rational democratic planning of the economy to solve all of the different problems facing humanity, which I believe includes the climate crisis. We live on this planet. We have an interest in solving the environmental crisis, not like the bourgeoisie, who have done everything in their power to profit from the climate crisis and make sure that none of the policies implemented affect their bottom line, which shows you what they care about the most at the end of the day. And in my opinion, they have lost, if they had it, they didn't have it, but let's play with that idea. They have lost the moral authority to own the economy. They should not own the economy. So we should take a revolution is coming, and that revolution is going to be directed against them, and it opens up the possibility of the working class to come to power, to expropriate the capitalists, and to start building a new form of society. And that is what we are doing with the Revolutionary Communist Party. Hope is not over. Liberal environmentalism is over. Liberal environmentalism has failed. So if you have felt that you don't know what to do, and you have been losing hope, just think that it's right to have no hope in liberalism. It's right to have no hope in capitalism, but we can have hope in fighting for a new society and fighting for a better world. And that's what we're doing with the Revolutionary Communist Party. I hope you like this episode of The Class Line, and I will see you in the next episode.